So we're joined all the way from across the Atlantic in London, England, by my friend Chi Mubaiwa. I hope I said it right. Uh,
Yep.
Junior software developer, career switcher. And we thank you so much for joining us today. We're in the digital technology career cluster. I've got a room full here with me at Velma Jackson High School, and we're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools, Madison Central, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, Rosa Scott, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for joining us. I guess it's this afternoon over there in the lovely United Kingdom.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay,
Great.
just making sure.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So, obviously, we want to talk about your career switch that you had about a year and a half ago. But just give
Hmm.
us a little background because you went to the University of Reading, got a degree in philosophy, worked in a completely different field than technology for several years. So, talk about your university experience and how you saw that you worked in a field, you were doing well in it, and then kind of changed paths.
Yep. Okay. So, yeah, first of all, hi everyone, and thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to speak with you all. As Greg mentioned, my name's Chi, and I'm a junior software engineer at an insurtech company. So I'll start with something important. Just you know, the tech industry is not something that you don't need a tech degree to get into it. I didn't come from a tech background at all. In fact, when I was around high school age, I didn't even really know what software engineering was.
Wow.
It was a completely different, like, unknown world to me. So when I finished high school, the plan was to become a lawyer. That was my dream. Um, I loved debating, thinking about big questions, and understanding why society, works the way it does. So I started off with studying philosophy at the University of Reading here in the UK. And I really, really enjoyed it. It kind of taught me how to think deeply and logically in a way that I actually still use today. And then after that, I went on to study my master's in international law, ethics, and politics at the University of Birmingham. At that point, I was still aiming for a future in law. And then after I finished my studies, I then went on to work in law enforcement and public services. I actually served in the police for a little while. I worked at a court, um, and I saw kind of like the inside of how institutions work, how systems work, and I learned a lot about people, a lot about responsibility and communication. But unfortunately, law is incredibly competitive. Like even with the degrees I had, even with the experience, like even with the passion that I had for law, I kept trying, but the doors just weren't opening. And I think it's tough because when you invest so many years into something, it's hard to say that like, maybe this isn't for me. It kind of felt like a failure, but it wasn't. And looking back, it was actually something, in my life that started, you know, getting better. It started going somewhere better. Um, but I did reach a moment where I had to be honest with myself and I had to ask
There you
myself,
go.
am I excited about where this path is going? Do I feel myself growing? Do I actually enjoy this work? Um, I did enjoy the work, but I didn't feel like I was growing and I wasn't excited about where that path was taking me. And ultimately, I just wanted something different, something creative, something challenging, and with an actual with actual room to grow. I kind of wanted a field where you can start from scratch if you're willing to learn, and that's kind of like where I discovered tech. And I think the career switching was quite seamless for me because I had a lot of transferable skills from all of my experience. So
There
that
you
was
go.
a really good foundation, and I didn't drive straight into software engineering. I started kind of like how a lot of beginners do. I started with like front end development. And for those that aren't familiar with what front end is, it's basically everything you see on like a website or an app, the
Yep.
colors, the buttons, the layout, the visual stuff. And it was interesting, but it just didn't click for me. I wasn't excited about making things look pretty. Um, so that's when I started learning about back end development. So when I, ventured into back-end development, that's kind of like where everything shifted. And back-end is kind of like the logic behind the scenes. It's the part that makes everything work. Kind of like an engine in a car. You don't see it, but it powers everything. I was dealing with data systems and problem solving. And suddenly I felt like, this is for me. It felt like my world. It felt logical. I enjoyed solving puzzles and I just enjoyed building something real.
Yeah.
And once I realized that this is what I want to do, I knew that I kind of needed some like proper training. And then that's when I started looking into kind of like boot camps that I could do, or like courses that I can do, because I think I met a few women who were also career switchers, and they told me, I don't have tech experience, I don't even have a degree. So it felt possible for me to kind of venture, into tech. So that's when I joined the Code First Girls program, which is a 4-month intensive training program.
Wow.
And the best part of that, yeah, like it was very intense. Don't get me wrong, very intense. I had to juggle it with, a 9 to 5, and then coming home, having an hour, if that, to myself, and then jumping, online to do classes. And I did that 4 times a week. And then weekends would be busy, like, doing coursework, projects, etc. It was very, very full on. Um, but it was so worth it because my job actually was attached to the program, meaning that if I completed the program successfully, I would earn a position as a junior software engineer. So
Wow.
that was really motivating, for me, and it gave me like a huge sense of purpose. Um, and during those 4 months, I think I learned Python, a bit of JavaScript, databases, and just software
Wow.
principles, all in those 4 months.
Wow.
And yeah, it was intense, but I did it. I passed. I got the job, and that's kind of how I entered the tech industry. No tech background whatsoever.
Wow.
So it is possible. It is very, very
Yeah.
possible, and there's a lot of initiatives that really support, women, especially going into tech, because I think women are so underrepresented in the tech industry, and they're really pushing for women to, come into the field.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
also, and I know your job is with an insurance company, so you're not even at a tech company. So literally every company is going to need tech people.
Yeah.
Because a great example I used on the same platform, I had a person that was in tech, and he was in charge of the state's server for the the Department of Revenue. So a $7 billion account, and
Hmm.
all he did was manage the server. He doesn't know anything about the money that goes into it. He's not collecting
Hmm.
the taxes. He's not sending the bills, but he runs that
Yeah.
server. And he's always like, well, I have to run the server and it can't go down. So they dealing with all
Hmm.
the money. I deal with all the back end and making sure all the data is
Yeah.
protected and the server doesn't go down. So it
Yeah.
literally touches more and more now than ever. You look at healthcare. In your case, you look at insurance. At the hotels we stay in, they have to have
Yeah.
a software system. So somebody is selling them that. Somebody is running that, and tech
Hmm.
is touching every single field now more than ever.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. Even in my company, we work with microservices, which are, little specialized programs that communicate with each other. And we do a lot of feature work. We run services that handle how customers manage their payments, manage their accounts. And we also use AWS, to deploy our systems. So yeah, like there is tech people literally at every company, even a company that you think doesn't need tech people, they're there doing all the work behind the scenes, making sure everything runs smoothly.
Yeah, and a
Yeah.
cool thing, and I'm glad you mentioned too about, I have a lot of intelligent young ladies in here with me now, and a lot of them, university is in their plan, and that's great. We're going to support them in that. If they want to go into the tech field, we have some great computer science programs here in Mississippi. But like you
Hmm.
said, if kids are watching this and say, look, I'd like to get into tech, but I'm not really a university person. You said it, and I've had people on the same platform say with their own mouth, you don't need to get a degree in this to work in it. You can join the
Yeah.
military and learn it. You can go to a boot camp. You can go to a community college, get that
Yeah.
certificate. And we actually have the opportunity for our students in Madison County schools to get IT certifications when they graduate from high school, and they can get into the field immediately at 18, 19 years old. So this is
Hmm.
a field that wants certifications, knowledge, and experience.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I think what matters in tech, it's not your background. I think tech is one of those fields where your background isn't a limitation. It can actually be a strength, like it can actually be one of your strengths. I think what matters in tech is just having curiosity, asking questions, problem solving, the willingness to learn as well, because tech never stops evolving, and persistence, and not giving up after just one bad day, because I've had many bad
Oh man,
days.
tell me about it. Thank you so much for mentioning that.
Yeah, I've had many bad days in tech. I've had times at work where I'm just so frustrated because something's not working, or I don't understand anything. But I don't let that get me down, because I know it's part of the process. And I know that with more experience and more time that I will, get better at what I'm doing. But you need to have persistence, and you just need to have that willingness to learn. Um, so I think you definitely should not let your background be a limitation. And again, you don't need a computer science degree or any degree to get into tech. You also don't need to like have been coding since childhood. You don't need to be really good at maths. You don't need to follow a straight or perfect
Yeah.
path, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that you are getting really, really into Python. You've also said you're a Java enthusiast. So, what are some of the programming languages that you're seeing that are becoming more and more prominent that kids could start getting familiar with now to kind of have a leg up if they want to get into this field?
Um, so I primarily work with Java, but I did touch a bit on Python. And I think Python is probably one of the most beginner friendly languages for kids to learn. And I think it's the best first real coding language, because it's very clean. The syntax is very kind of English like. Um, it's used in, data science, in AI, automation, in web development. There's tons and tons of beginner tutorials, and it's easy to start with, but it's also powerful. So I think that's probably the best if you're looking to get into like backend engineering, maybe. I think Python is a great beginner first language. I think that was one of the first languages that I learned before touching on Java, because Java's a little bit more robust. It's a little more difficult, but I think Python is a great starting point, because, like the concepts are the same. Once you have that foundation, then you can go ahead and start looking at, things like Java. I think if you're more into front end, I think HTML and CSS is great for visual learners. They're not classed as full programming languages, but they're perfect for beginners. Instant visual results, because you can see what you're doing. And it's great for kids who like creativity and design. And it's a great intro into how the web works.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, I'd recommend Python and possibly HTML and CSS. I think also JavaScript is a good one. Not my favorite. I don't really like front end, and I wasn't a fan of JavaScript, but it's used so widely, in my company, and it's used so widely in front end development. And I think it's great because JavaScript is the language of the web. You can make interactive websites and simple games. There's tons of resources online as well if you want to learn JavaScript, and you can build a lot of fun projects with it. And the last one I would say is Java. I think this is one of the most commonly taught languages, and it's also used by big companies. I mean,
Oh
it's good
wow.
for understanding structured programming. It is a bit more strict and a bit more structured, but it's a great foundation if you want to understand how big systems work, and it's used a lot. So those are the languages that I would say are good for beginners, maybe to start with.
Now, before I get to their questions, one thing I wanted to mention is, I have a lot of kids tell me they want to get into tech because, they're into the tech stuff, but they say, I don't really like people. I just I want to work on the computer. And that's fine because it definitely needs great tech people. We need more young people to get into this. But
Hmm.
especially in your case, if you're a tech person in a non-tech field, a non-tech company, you're going to have to be a great communicator. You're going to
Yep.
have to break things down to people and say, hey, here's what the problem was. Here's what I did. Here's how this is going to work. When you do this, here's what's going to happen. So, as a person that works in a non-tech company, or and we talked about healthcare, if you're working with a doctor, you're going to have to explain to them how things work. So, how
Mhm.
important is it to work on those communication skills and those speaking skills? Because I know I can speak for every other teacher that sees this, is that that's the biggest challenge we have with this generation is that they're so scared to talk and they get so shy and they're, they can watch TikTok all day long, but having that conversation is where we have the breakdown. So, how important is it to be good at those communication skills as well, as somebody in tech?
I think communication is one of the most important skills in tech, actually, because a lot of people, including myself, I used to think, software engineers would just sit alone and write code all day, but that's not true. um, you need to be able to communicate because in tech, in my experience personally, you rarely work alone. Most of our projects are team projects. You don't only have software engineers, but you also have your designers, your UX designers, you have your product managers, you have your quality engineers. You need to explain what you're working on. You need to ask questions and give updates and understand what others need. So I, from my experience, I don't think it's possible to get by as a software engineer without communication, because good communication also prevents mistakes. Um, I think so many bugs and deadlines come from misunderstandings and not bad code. And I think when you've got clear communication, you have fewer problems and you also have a happier team. And I think good communication also makes you stand out. My senior engineer always says to me that a software engineer who communicates will become reliable and trustworthy. So yeah, I think if you are thinking about getting into software engineering, as a software engineer or even as a product manager or quality engineer, then you definitely need to have communication skills. I don't think it's possible to be a software engineer without having communication, unfortunately, because I know some people really would like to just work alone, and be left alone all day, but that's not the reality. I think software engineering, one of the pillars of it is teamwork and communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny that actually one of them had a question about that, so you answered it. You answered it for, her, so I won't even get to that one. But I do have some
Yep.
questions here, and these are really good. I like this first one. This is Adija Bell. She's in 10th grade, one of our basketball players here, and she
Mm-hmm.
asked, "How do you apply your philosophy degree to real life situations now?"
How do I apply my philosophy degree to? Um, so I think philosophy taught me how to think logically. And when it comes to software engineering, um, obviously we get presented with a problem. And I think when it comes to problem solving, especially in software engineering, you have to think logically.
Yeah.
I'm someone who tends to think like, I think my emotions sometimes guide my thinking. Um,
Oh, we're all
but
guilty of
it's
that.
um um but yeah, so my philosophy degree definitely gave me that foundation to be able to break down complex ideas. So obviously in philosophy, you take huge complicated concepts and ethics, logic, and you break them into smaller manageable pieces, and that's exactly what coding is. So like when you're debugging something or designing a system, it's the kind of the same skill that you learn in philosophy. You take something complicated, you break it down, and you reason your way through it. And I think that's been great for me because logic is the foundation of programming. It translates directly into things like if and else statements, Boolean logic, control flow, debugging. And I think philosophy taught me how arguments work. And I've been able to use that logic in coding, and it teaches me how computers make decisions. And I think the thinking style between the two is almost identical, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's crazy. You keep answering these questions they have. That's hilarious that they're asking this and you're talking about it. I like this one. This is Cambry Luckett. She's in 9th grade, and she asked, in your work, do you ever use any of the wearables, the smartwatches or the rings? or are you only using computers?
I only ever use my computer, to be honest. I don't have a smartwatch. That's one thing that I've never used. But yeah, I only use my laptop, and that's it. I feel like for me, the less technology I have, the better.
Now, I will say this. I think it's important for young people to learn multiple operating systems. They're all, I've got you on a MacBook right now, so they know the iOS. But learning
Hmm.
Windows, learning Linux, it just I've had to use, and I'm not even a tech person. I've had to use multiple operating systems throughout my career, and the more programs you can be familiar with, the more marketable it makes you. Period in any career.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's, you know, multi-talented. Knowing different systems will definitely um work in your advantage. I think my thing is I've just tried to kind of like just master one thing and then move on to different things because that's the type of learner that I am. Even with programming, obviously, I've been given advice that, you should, try and learn different languages. But for me, I've really found great benefit in just being really strong in one and then pivoting into, other programming languages. But I do think, it is important to learn different systems. But the advice I would give is, become good at one and then you can slowly start venturing into different systems.
Awesome. Well, I got time for two more. This is
Okay.
Kaylin Bullock. She's in ninth grade. And she asked, when you switched careers, did you face any self-doubt? And if you did, why?
Did I face any self-doubt? I did. Um, I think so. The thing is, when you're a career switcher and you pivot into tech, you are going to be surrounded with people that have a wealth of experience. I'm talking people that have 20, 30 years of experience. You're going to be faced with people that have come from tech backgrounds. And I feel like now I still have that self-doubt. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of like imposter syndrome, which is something that I've been battling with ever since I started. Um, and I think it is scary to start something new, especially when you don't have the traditional background. But I think once I started learning, I saw progress. That feeling kind kind of faded. It's still there. Um, but what I've told myself is that I just need to keep on learning, being committed to learning, pushing myself, and not being afraid to rise up to challenges. Because there'll be times at work when a new task is brought to us, and I'm thinking to myself, "This is way too challenging for me. This is way too complex. I can't do it." And I almost talk myself out of it, but that's not beneficial for me because if you don't challenge yourself, you're not going to grow. Um, and I think what's helped is having like a really amazing support system. The mentors at my work are great. They really are they're really supportive and they're always willing to share their knowledge. Um, so I did have a lot of self-doubt and I think I still do now, but I'm only a year into the role. And I think as I gain more experience and more time passes, that self-doubt is going to continue shrinking. But I use that self-doubt as my motivation to keep learning more because that's all I can do really is just keep learning and trying to, improve my skills. But you just got to
Wow.
take the first step. Just take the first step, which is the
There
hardest
you
part,
go.
is just take the step. Yeah.
I was a career switcher as well, and I agree 100%. And a lot of the things that you said were very similar to me. So it's crazy how similar our stories are. Now, I'm not a tech person, but I
Yeah.
had a very, very similar path. I love it. The last one, this is Brianna Williams. She's in 10th grade, one of our basketball players. And she asked, what is your favorite thing about coding?
Um, my favorite thing about coding. There's many things actually. I think my first favorite thing about coding is the challenge. Um, I think because I was stuck in careers where I didn't feel like I was challenged or I was growing, um, I got kind of bored. But with coding, like there's always a challenge. So every time I learn something new or whenever I solve a problem, it feels like proof that I made the right decision to switch careers. Coding constantly pushes me, but in the best way. because you're always improving, you're always learning something, and you're always building something useful. Um, I also like that with coding, I love the moment when something finally works after you've been stuck on it. And it could be
Oh
like the
yeah.
silly thing. It could be like the smallest thing where, I don't know, your code won't compile because there's like a syntax error and you spent ages trying to solve it and then you finally solve it and then you just that feeling is amazing. And it's like solving a puzzle that does something cool afterwards. But yeah, that feeling of just solving something after you've been stuck on it is amazing. And I think another thing that I like about coding or just working in software engineering as in general, I think it's the collaboration. I'm in a team with a lot of experienced people, a lot of really talented individuals, and a lot of them have passed on their knowledge to me. You just get to learn from like experts, which I think is amazing. I can already see kind of like the progress that I've made just through them, teaching me things. So
Wow.
yeah, those are my top three things that I like about coding.
That's that's so cool. And we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. I mean, you know, it's amazing. I started this platform in COVID, and we never would have imagined that technology would bring us to where we would have somebody across the ocean and another continent speaking to us about a field that is the same thing in the UK is the same way in the United States. It is amazing how
Yep.
universal this field is. So, as these
Yep.
kids are starting to make decisions as they
Hmm.
finish high school. And a lot of these careers that you see did not exist even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
They definitely didn't exist when their parents were going to school or when I was going to school. So this is all a lot of new things. A lot of companies are needing this. A lot of companies are needing talented people. So
Yep.
why should these kids really consider getting into this field as they start making decisions for their future?
I think one piece of advice I'd give is that, you don't have to have everything figured out. You don't need to have a perfect plan.
There you
I
go.
think you just need to be willing to try things to explore because when I was in the same position and I was thinking about tech, but I wasn't sure, I just started doing a bunch of different courses to kind of, understand what it is that I wanted to do. So I think just be willing to try things and to explore. And don't, if you feel like, I don't know what to do, I'm not smart enough, or this seems too complicated. I felt all those things too, but here I am, 1 year into my software engineering role. So I think just be willing to try things, and just don't be afraid. The world is changing fast,
Yeah.
and tech is one of the few fields where starting from scratch is, it's welcomed. So I think even if you're just curious, just give it a try. Take a short course, play with the coding tutorial, experiment. You might surprise yourself because I know that I did. I never thought I'd ever be, a software engineer, and I went for it, and here I am.
Wow, I love it.
Yeah,
Such a great story. Such a great job you're doing out there. But
yeah,
again, we thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a Merry Christmas and a great Boxing Day and a Happy New Year out there in London. Chi
yeah.
Mubaiwa, all the way from London, United Kingdom. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
I talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you, thank you. Bye.